16 years. 16 years. 16. Hi everyone, it's James here. Welcome to another video. And today I'm going to do something a bit different, something I've never done on my channel before. I'm going to do an album war. Now I know Richard McCook did a series of these a few years back, so Richard, hope you don't mind me borrowing this theme. So an album war is just basically what it says on the tin. You just pit one album against another, try to work out which one is best, which one you prefer. So the reason for this video is that I listened to one particular record the other night and it just made me think of another album. So I decided, okay, let's try and see which one of these two I prefer, because I knew that I liked both the albums. So the first one, as you'll have seen from the thumbnail and the title of the video, is Street Hassle by Lou Reed. And when I went to get the record from the shelf, in the back of my mind I was thinking, okay, what's this album called? And the name that came to me as I was searching for it, because I could see the album cover in my head, I couldn't quite remember the title. And when I went to pull it, I thought to myself, right until the last minute when I pulled it off the shelf, I thought it was called Street Legal. And when it came off the shelf, I saw that it was called Street Hassle, and I thought, well, what's Street Legal then? Of course, Bob Dylan. And so that got me thinking about this record, which I also really like. And then I started to realise that there were actually some parallels between them. For a start, they were recorded and released quite close together. We'll get into the dates now in a minute. And I suppose also you'd refer to them both as maybe mid-table albums by the respective artists. Street Legal has its fans, but it's not traditionally put really high up in people's ranking lists. By the same token, Street Hassle as well by Lou Reed, even though it's a good album and lots of people like it, it tends not to be in the very upper echelons, along with Transformer and New York, for example. It's a bit more kind of mid-table. The other thing that these two records have in common, well, actually there's one big thing which I thought of, which is Bruce Springsteen. Bruce Springsteen famously appears on this album. What happened was Lou was recording the record at the record plant in New York, and he had this song called Street Hassle, the title track, and he'd written a line for the song, or he borrowed a line and he hadn't realised that he borrowed it, the line being, tramps like us, we were born to pay. Now it just so happened that Bruce was down the corridor recording Darkness on the Edge of Town, so they went down the corridor, asked Bruce if he minded them using this line in Street Hassle, and not only did Springsteen agree, but he actually agreed to narrate the whole section of the song in which that line occurs. He was never credited on the record because there was some contractual reason why he wasn't able to be credited, but Springsteen famously appears on that track, and I think one of the greatest things he ever did, actually. When he comes in, he's just doing it in this very nonchalant kind of speaking voice. He just sounds cool as hell, you know, and you can blink and miss him. Now Springsteen is not on Street Legal, let me get this right, but again, famously, this record has a bit of a Springsteen vibe to it. Bob employed a saxophone player who just brought a bit of that kind of horn-led sound to the track, or to the album rather. This was the period where Bruce was going through the roof. He was a huge star, and there was some talk of him having supplanted Dylan or being the new Bob Dylan. So I suppose Dylan was trying to exploit some of that, trying to get his sound maybe a bit more contemporary. So yeah, I suppose, you know, I thought, well, there's quite an interesting parallel between the two records, the sort of horn sound, Bruce Springsteen connection, and just the fact that the records were recorded and released quite close together. So Street Hassle was recorded and was released first. It actually had quite a long genesis, a long gestation. It was recorded between March and October 1977 and finally released in February of 1978. And Street Legal was recorded very quickly, in a matter of days. The back end of April, going into the first week of May 1978, and the album was released on June the 15th, 1978. So this one in February, that one in June of 1978, so very close together. So yeah, so that in a nutshell is why I thought, okay, let's kind of pit these two against each other. And I suppose the other reason is that I just really like both these records. They've always been ones that stand out to me in the catalogue as being probably upper mid-table. You know, I think, in fact, one of them I think is probably higher than that. So the first one I listened to was this one, and really enjoyed it. I'd forgotten actually that most of it, or large chunks of it, are actually live. It was a live album originally, intended to be a live album, but the record company pulled the plug on that. Lou fell out with the producer, whose name escapes me now, but they had a bit of a fight in the studio, a bit of a bust-up, so the project kind of got mothballed a little bit. Lou relocated to the record plant in New York, wrote the title track, Street Hassle, which is this absolutely wonderful, is it 12 minutes? Or something like that. It starts with this lovely kind of string section with Lou singing over the top of it, and then it gradually morphs and the string section starts being played with an electric guitar, and then it goes into this really heavy bass guitar section. It's absolutely masterful the way it segues from one section to the next. And the lyric, it's just classic Lou Reed. It's kind of spoken, half sung. I think it's about a relationship that happens in an apartment. This couple, you know, having sex, and then the girl dies of a drug overdose. And there's a great monologue in it where one of these characters is accusing somebody else of having brought bad drugs into the apartment. And it's just so sort of, you know, textbook Lou Reed, really. That makes it sound a bit too calculated. It's not. It's just very him. It's very streets of New York, a kind of downtown, seedy kind of thing, which he lived through in the 60s. In a way, the album is a bit of a throwback to the Velvet Underground. In fact, there's one track, let me just make sure I give you the right one. One of the tracks went back to the Velvet's days, Real Good Times Together, which is the second song on side 2, had previously been released in 1969 on the Velvet's live album. He was trying to maybe reconnect with some of that really dirty, scuzzy kind of Velvet sound, and the guitar sound on this record is just absolutely filthy. It's really attitudey, it's got a real kind of teenage, burned out kind of sound to it, very intense, very sort of nasty sounding. The album is actually quite nasty, quite unpleasant. The track Dirt was a bit of a diatribe against his ex-manager at the time. His name was Dennis Katz. I don't know that story. I don't know what the story of that was, but it's certainly a very acerbic, a very sarcastic and horrible lyric, much in the spirit of, it made me think of the Queen song Death on Two Legs, which was also written about the band's relationship with their manager at the time, which had soured. The album is also meant to document the end of Lou's relationship with his trans girlfriend Rachel Humphreys. I've not tried to trace the lyrical stories that run through the record, but apparently that is one of the inspirations for the album. So I kind of thought, right, well, I really enjoyed this record, so let us go to this one and see what I think of this one. This one is great as well, really great. Bob Dylan, this was just before he did the Christian trilogy. In fact, when this album came out, it was publicised. I think there was a press release where Dylan basically announced to the world that he was now a born-again Christian, and then after this came the famous Christian trilogy. So it was very much a transitional time in Bob's life. He'd been through his divorce with Sarah, and there was a custody battle over the children, which was very messy and very stressful. Dylan was not in a very good place when he made this album at all. The band that he initially got together had been some of the musicians that he'd used on the Rolling Thunder Review tour, but then gradually various people fell away and he got different people on board. Ended up being a really good band. Actually, the other reason why this album makes me think of the Lou Reed one is that you've got the girl singers, Carolyn Dennis, Joanne Harris and Helena Springs on backing vocals, and of course on Street Hassle as well you've also got a really brilliant female backing vocal section. An absolutely sublime moment towards the end of in the middle section of Street Hassle, just where it's blending from the string quartet into the guitar section. There's this absolutely wonderful ethereal bit of female singing. So Dylan, he recorded the album quickly in a studio that he'd never used before, and there were some sound problems in the studio. Dylan was not particularly happy with the way the sound came together, and in later years the album was, I think critically, in terms of the songwriting, it went down quite well, but the sound was viewed as being not great. I think somebody described it as sounding like it had been recorded in a load of wet cardboard. But then later on, it was remastered. The first time I heard this record actually was on the remastered CD, which sounds really good. They cleaned it up, they got the drums sounding much better. One thing that really defines this record is the sound of the drums. So the drummer was Ian Wallace, who had some prog credentials. I think he played with King Crimson. He had a very, very loud driving style, which was maybe not the best fit for Bob Dylan in some ways, but I suppose it did give it that more direct, upbeat kind of Bruce Springsteen kind of sound, made it sound almost like stadium rock in a way. Dylan trying to retool himself, repurpose himself, I think, as the 80s were honing into view, starting to try and big up his sound a little bit. So anyway, I mean, lots and lots of great tracks on this record. You've got Changing of the Guards, which is just an absolutely majestic Bob song, one of those really long, epic tracks. New Pony, which is a bit of a down and dirty rocker. No Time to Think, which just has some really, really great wordplay. Baby Stop Crying, which is a bit of a Bob classic, not one that I'm hugely fond of compared to some of the others. Is Your Love in Vain, just an absolute, grade A Bob belter. Senor, Tales of Yankee Power, which I think some critics saw that as being maybe the first sort of inklings in song about Bob's coming obsession with Christianity, maybe, which again is a great track. True Love Tends to Forget, and We Better Talk This Over, and Where Are You Tonight finishes the record in grand style. So a really, really strong sequence of tracks on this record. So comparing it to Street Hassle, what we have here is the really great title track, which I've described already. The album starts with Give Me Some Good Times, which is a bit of a meat and potatoes rocker, really. It's okay. It's not one of Lou's greatest tracks, really, and nor is Dirt. Dirt is very punky sounding, very nasty sounding, but it's not terribly. It's not very edifying to listen to. It's got a bit of a kind of personal, venomous quality to it. And then side 2 starts with I Wanna Be Black, which is, I think, quite a good song, but maybe lyrically now, maybe a little bit questionable. You probably couldn't get away with a song like that nowadays. Real Good Time Together, I think, is really great. It's got a bit of a Bo Diddley sound on the guitar, and there's no drums in it all the way through, and then right towards the back end of the track, all of a sudden the drums and the bass come piling in, and it sounds really fantastic. Shooting Star, which I think is a really great Lou song, it's got a really infectious chorus. Leave Me Alone is a bit of a teenage rant, again with a really great guitar sound, very scuzzy, very angry sounding. And then Wait at the end of the album is a surprisingly upbeat sounding song, almost like a little pop song, really. Quite pleasant, but nothing too special. So, have you worked out which record is going to win the album war? I think, on reflection, it's going to have to be Street Legal. I think this record shows Bob a real songwriting high, carving some really, really intricate lyrical epics, and I think the band is really good, really strong. There's some really tremendous tunes. So maybe vocally it's not Bob's finest hour. He sounds a little bit ragged, but it works. But I think in general, I just think the songs are stronger. I think it sounds more like somebody who's really feeling it. Yeah, just in terms of the songwriting chops, feeling the inspiration. This album, I think, has got a great sound, and I really love the attitude, and I love the guitar sounds on it, that kind of lean, mean kind of sound. And the title track, Street Hassle, I think is one of the greatest things Lou ever did. I find it very moving, actually. It's like watching a really moving film, something very realistic, very documentary-like. And it's quite unique in Lou's catalogue, just that way it has of going from the strings into the rock. I just think it works really well. But there's a couple of songs on this record, as I've gone through, which I don't think are too great as songs. I think it's Lou more in his attitudey punk phase rather than in his great songwriting phase. So you get an album like New York, obviously is one of his really great songwriting albums, and then you get The Bells, which is not one of his great songwriting albums, but it's him doing something sonically interesting and different. I think Street Hassle is kind of more like that rather than in the New York mould. Whereas Bob Dylan, I think you could make an argument for Street Legal actually being amongst maybe, 8 to 10 of the greatest Dylan albums. Can I get away with that? Anyway, I suppose just personal taste comes into it at the end of the day, but I decided in the end to give it to Street Legal. Thanks for watching, as usual. It is much appreciated, and I'll see you in the next video.